I was born in London. My parents, who were refugees, they managed to escape Nazi Germany. My mother arrived something like 3 days before the war with England. She managed to get a visa, and there's a story goes that her parents were very religious, and her father was in the town, and a policeman spoke to him, a friend of his. Can you believe that? And he said, "When is your daughter leaving for England?" And this was on this was a Friday morning, and he said on Sunday. And he said, "Well, you should take her tomorrow," which was Saturday, which is the Sabbath, and they were very religious, Jewish, and so he obviously took the advice, and he took her to the station. And sadly, that was the last time she saw her father. She was 18 years old. She arrived in Belgium to take the ferry boat to England. Her two younger brothers, one was 16, the other was 13, managed to escape illegally to Belgium, and she managed to see them. And again, sadly, that was the last time she saw them, because, as we know, Germany invaded Belgium, and they were caught, arrested, and sent to Auschwitz, where they were murdered. All this, you can imagine, my mother affected her deeply, and it was only obviously after the war that she found out what happened to them. My mother managed to work. She worked in, when she arrived, I think she worked in, she always said she worked in tailoring, but I can imagine it must have been like a sweatshop when she started, but she managed to work. So anyway, my mother, she was all alone in London, and she was told that she had a cousin, and the name of the cousin was called Silly. I think that's the right pronunciation. I always, as a child, thought that was very funny to be called Silly. Anyway, someone told her, "Oh, you'll find her, she's living in Hendon," and she gave her an address. And anyway, she hadn't seen this cousin, I suppose, when they were children, so she wouldn't be able to recognize her. So anyway, she came to the address, and she rang the bell, and a lady answered, and my mother looked at her and said, "Are you Silly?" So, well, she wasn't silly. She actually was a very sensible person. Anyway, she became, they became, instantly friends. She must have been, the woman, her name is Inni Hubel. She was from Poland. And as children, we always used to call her Mrs. Hubel. That's the name that we always never called her by her first name. And they became instant friends. She became a second mother to her, you know. And they told her they got her to move in. I mean, she was living, I imagine, in some kind of, you know, like a bed and breakfast or something. I don't know exactly where she was living. And she did move in. They had two daughters, Sabina and Angela. And so anyway, the husband, his name was Max Hubel, was a real character. He always reminded me of Broadwood Crawford, the actor, sort of a big man, but a real character. And he did a lot of wheeling and dealing, but that's another story. So anyway, my mother lived there for a time, and she was working, as I said, in tailoring, and she changed jobs and everything like that. My father is slightly different, because my father, when he arrived, he was 17 years old. He must have been on the last Kindertransport. He was an only child. His mother was divorced, which was a big scandal. So for a while he lived with his grandparents, and then when things got difficult in Germany for Jews, they managed to leave and go to Holland, But as we know, in Holland, the Germans invaded, and unfortunately they died as well. And then he went to boarding school, which was really difficult. You can imagine in the 30s, and the Nazis, and being Jewish and very short, it didn't help. So his childhood was not one of the best. He arrived. His mother came a bit later. His mother managed to get out as well. At the beginning he was interned because they thought maybe he was a German spy. I think you'd have to have a terrific imagination to imagine my dad as a spy. I don't think so. But anyway, well, his name was Rolf Moss, so I suppose he could say Rolf Moss. It doesn't have the same ring as James Bond, does it? No. Anyway, so Dad was interned for a while, and then finally they realised he wasn't any great threat to England, and so he started working. I think he worked, if not mistaken, he worked in a shoe factory for a while. There's a story there. His English wasn't brilliant, actually, and there was a story. He worked very well. They liked him, and there was a story he told me. He said his boss came up to him and said, "I'm going to give you a raise," and he said, "I don't like rice." He said, "No, a raise." He thought it was rice. He didn't like rice. Anyway, somehow he managed. The boss managed to make himself understood, and he knew he was making a bit more money. But Dad worked in many places. He worked in he worked as a waiter at the Lion Corner House. Those who have memories of the Lion Corner House. And then I think one of the last places he worked as a waiter was at a club called the Embassy Club, which was very